Thank you for joining us today to learn more about physical activity for toddlers. Be Active Kids would like to welcome our guest speaker, Claire Heffron, from the Inspired Treehouse. We have a great presentation scheduled today and a lot of people are on the webinar. So we ask that everyone mute their phones and computers if you have not done so already. If you need to make a comment or ask a question, please do so in the chat box. Please know that in order to receive credit for attending the webinar, you will need to complete the polls, the survey, and remain attentive throughout the webinar. Now here's Claire.
Hi there. So we are back today to talk a little bit more about physical activities for little ones. This time around, we're going to be looking at the toddler age group. So we're talking about ages 1 to 3 primarily, and then we'll also get into some fun activities and ideas that can be used even up with the preschool ages as well. So just to tell you a little bit about myself, we can go ahead to that next slide. My name is Claire Heffron. I'm a pediatric occupational therapist, and my partner Lauren and I, she's a physical therapist, and we worked together for many years in the same school district. And we, a couple of years back, decided to start our own blog, our own website, where we can share information about child development, and also different activities that people can do with kids to promote healthy development in all kids, whether they have disabilities and delays or not. So you can check out our website. It's theinspiredtreehouse.com, and everything there on the site is just free resources. We do have a shop where we have books, ebooks, and guides and things, but most of the information is there just in regular blog posts, and you can go ahead and check that out on your own. And let's see, so we can go ahead to the next one, I think is the intro, and then we'll talk a little bit about toddlers. So this age group is a little bit sturdier, a little more steady on their feet, and even more ready to explore the world than they were when they were babies. So some really big changes happen during these first years of childhood as babies become toddlers. They meet all kinds of developmental milestones as they gain balance and confidence and independence. And while their brains are developing, so does their coordination and motor control, which allows them to begin to achieve higher level motor skills, like jumping and skipping and even pedaling a bike. So there are tons of fun ideas that we can use to support toddlers as they develop these higher level motor skills. And just as play was a very powerful tool to use with the babies as they develop those foundation skills like rolling and crawling, really play can really be used in our work with toddlers as well. And that's no surprise. Toddlers like to play, right? First, we'll talk a little bit about the skills that you'll see emerging in this age group. I think it's a good idea to have sort of a background on what types of skills are coming at what ages, and then you can kind of choose the activities that you want to do with those age groups accordingly. So we'll start with the youngest toddlers, ages 1 and 2. And here on this slide, you'll see some of the general fine motor skills that come at this age. The tiny muscles in babies' hands start to really gain strength and control during this age. Little ones will want to start scribbling with a crayon. They'll begin feeding themselves with their fingers and even holding a spoon. They may be able to start picking up small objects without just raking it off the table. And you'll notice that as you read to kids at this age, they start to reach for the pages and turn the pages, especially with those board books. So all these little fine motor skills are starting to come along. We can go to the next slide and talk about the gross motor skills for this age group. Sometime between 12 and 24 months, babies will progress from standing and balancing there by themselves to learning to walk, and they may even start to run, which is exciting for us as caregivers to chase after them. At this age, toddlers will also begin to explore by climbing on furniture and stairs. They'll start to learn to throw and kick a ball, not with a lot of force or accuracy yet. That comes later on. They start to be able to ride on those ride-on toys, and it becomes a lot more fun because you don't have to push them anymore. They can use their feet to kind of alternate and make themselves move forward. And right here, I'm going to interject and just say that we're going to talk about all these skills, and I think it's important just to remember that babies all develop at their own pace. So the skills that we're mentioning and the age ranges that we're mentioning, they're just a general representation of the norm. And as long as kids are falling somewhere near that range, chances are development is occurring typically. Sometimes people get nervous if things don't happen exactly on time. So just wanted to mention that. We will move on now to look at the next slide. That's going to be ages 2 to 3. For ages 2 to 3, it is all about play. So the developmental milestones toddlers have already achieved mean that they can become increasingly independent, and they're able to engage in play activities for longer periods of time without needing so much guidance and supervision. And when they're playing, these kids are learning, no doubt about it. So that learning happens not just in their minds, but in their bodies too. So they're starting to gain coordination and balance and motor skills. And as we know, those skills are the foundation for the next more complicated skill that they will achieve. So during this age range, fine motor skills really start taking off. This is the age group that we see as therapists coming into us as preschoolers. So kids turning 3 will enter our preschool program. And this is just a cool age to have kids coming into school. You start to see what they can do. They can build towers out of blocks and string beads. They might even have enough control over their crayons to start drawing simple shapes and lines, possibly even beginning to imitate lines that you draw on a piece of paper. With a little help, 2- and 3-year-olds begin to snip paper with scissors. They can cut across paper and participate in simple crafts and art projects. Our next slide is the gross motor skills for this age group. At this age, toddlers begin to jump, and once they start, they don't want to stop. So you might notice them jumping in place, jumping forward, jumping down from a bottom step. Those are all favorite activities of this age group. Balance at this age improves also to the point where they may be able to stand on one foot for a few seconds. They'll start pedaling a tricycle and galloping around this age. Stairs start to become a little bit stronger, so they'll be more aware of safety. You don't have to, you have to be nearby, of course, but you don't have to be so worried that they're going to, just go for it and take a tumble down the stairs. They start to kind of hold back a little bit, hold on to a railing, and maybe start to navigate the stairs by placing both feet together on each step and eventually alternating feet on the stairs. So now we'll move on and talk about milestones for kids who are a little bit older, and these are generally considered outside that toddler age group and moving into preschool age kids. Like I said, a lot of the activities that we'll talk about today are appropriate for this age group as well, so we thought it would be good to touch on some of the milestones for these kids. So again, this is the age range we see in our work, and kids make so many rapid gains in this window. They achieve all kinds of developmental milestones here. So this is where skills start to become a little bit more refined. They become more balanced, more coordinated, and a lot more confident at this age. So here's kind of what you can expect from this 3 to 5-year-old group. Fine motor skills are progressing like crazy. Again, they start to have a more mature grasp on crayons and pencils, gradually working their way toward a tripod grasp. At this point, they're definitely able to copy lines and shapes, even letters. By 5, they'll start to show really nice accuracy with coloring in the lines. Also, by 5, kids have usually settled on a dominant hand, and they'll begin to write their names accurately and more independently and copy other letters of the alphabet from a model. Scissor skills really take a jump here too. They used to just be able to kind of snip and hack at the paper a little bit, and now they're able to cut on lines and cut out shapes and cut on curved lines. Also, dressing skills become a lot more independent at this age. So usually by 5 years old, kids are able to complete dressing skills and clothing fasteners with little or no assistance. And that makes getting ready in the morning and getting ready to go outside or getting ready at the end of the day a lot more achievable. Okay, we can go on to gross motor skills. And during this period, kids become more proficient at climbing stairs. So they're able to go up and down using one foot on each step with that alternating pattern. They may even be able to do it without holding on to the railing as they approach the end of preschool. At this age, kids are able to stand and balance on one foot for longer periods of time without that swaying and leaning all over the place. And here come those other higher level gross motor skills like hopping, galloping, skipping, all those things that you do in the gym. Ball skills also improve dramatically at this age. So they start to be able to throw and kick with more force and more accuracy They may be able to throw and kick at a target or play catch back and forth with a lot more coordination. Kids at this age may be proficient at pedaling and steering a tricycle, and around this time they're starting to get ready to learn to ride a real bicycle as well, with training wheels and then gradually without. Swing sets are lots of fun at this age, and they no longer just are content sitting on the swing, but they want to climb and hang upside down and slide. So all those things are coming in this preschool window. So now that we know what motor skills we can expect from kids ages 1 to 5, let's talk about all the fun play activities we can do to support the development of these skills. There are so many fun ways to play and engage with toddlers, and all of these ways can help ensure that they achieve the motor skills they need to be functional and independent as they move into school age. In the last infant webinar, we talked about free play, and I mentioned that it is the single most important play experience you can offer to babies with regard to motor development, and the same thing goes for toddlers for sure. Free play looks a little different now at this age. It means climbing and jumping and running, stomping, throwing, catching, and more. It's so important. I can't emphasize this enough. The more free time kids get to explore the way their bodies move, the more independent and functional they become with gross motor and fine motor skills, as well as with sensory processing. So we can jump right into some fun sensory play activities for toddlers. I think that's our next slide. And if you're a part of our infant webinar, you already know that the good old-fashioned 5 senses are only the beginning when it comes to sensory play. So you've heard of hearing, sight, touch, smell, and taste, but there are 2 other sensory systems that are very important to know about when it comes to talking about toddlers and movement. And those 2 systems are the vestibular system and the proprioceptive system. And I'm just going to briefly kind of touch on these again. I'm sorry if you've heard this in our last webinar, but it's a good, I think it's a good review for anyone who might be new to this session. So our vestibular system has to do with balance and movement. It is centered in our inner ear. And when we move our heads, the fluid in the organs inside our inner ear moves and shifts. And that fluid movement is what gives us the information about the position of our heads and bodies in space. So this is how we maintain balance and how we experience that secure feeling that we're not going to fall. Our vestibular system allows us to move smoothly and efficiently. So stimulating the vestibular system involves movement and transitions into and out of position. So anything from being upright to upside down to swaying, leaning, swinging, sliding, rocking, those are all vestibular experiences. The proprioceptive system refers to the way the joints and muscles send messages to our brain to help coordinate movement. So this is what allows us to grade the force and direction of our movements and tells us how much effort we need to apply when we're making different changes in our movements. So while the vestibular system tells the brain about balance, proprioception tells us how to coordinate the movement of our arms and legs in an efficient way. So proprioceptive sensory experiences are a little bit different, and they include activities where you're working against resistance, so pushing and pulling, jumping, stomping, or drumming, so activities where you're providing impact to the joints and muscles, rolling, crashing, and crawling, where you're providing impact to the whole body. So now that we're kind of all on the same page about the sensory systems, we can kind of move into talking about the sensory play ideas that can get kids' bodies moving and using all their sensory systems together. So the next slide, we'll start with tactile activities. And the first one, exploring food. So snack time can be a great sensory play activity for the hands and the mouth. You can let kids touch, feel, and make a little bit of a mess while they eat to provide input to the tactile and oral sensory systems. Playing with stickers or tape. Kids love peeling stickers and tape off of tables, and there's a lot of fine motor benefit to that too. And then the sticky texture of the tape and stickers is also a really fun tactile play experience. We put them on tables, walls, or the floor and have kids kind of do a movement activity to peel them off. I've also found that stickers and tape are a really successful way to work on body part identification. So placing a small sticker or a piece of tape on the child's hand or foot and then saying the word for the body part as they take that tape or sticker off of them. Or you can let them put the stickers or tape on you and you do the same thing, labeling those body parts. They love that. That's a fun one. A feel and find game using a shoebox with a hole cut in the top. So you can place a soft, smooth, rough, or furry item inside and let the kids feel and describe what they feel. And that's an important thing to mention with all of these sensory activities. A huge component here is giving kids the language to describe the sensory experiences that they're having. So if they can use the words for what they're touching, it's rough, it's smooth, it's hard, and even describe how they're feeling when they're having these sensory experiences, it can really be an awesome thing, not only for language development and vocabulary development, but also for them later as they get older to be able to describe their needs and preferences when it comes to sensory experiences. Because some kids get a little too revved up with certain types of sensory play. Some kids find certain sensory experiences to be calming. So it's really neat to give them the language they need to be able to describe those experiences and how they feel. The next one is water beads. So you can put those water beads in a big Ziploc bag and hang it on a window with heavy-duty tape. That's an awesome tactile and visual play activity. That actually comes from another blog called Parenting Chaos, and we have a link to that on the resources page, so you can check that out on your own. Bubble foam is a really fun way to stimulate the tactile system. It's kind of a foamy, soapy shaving cream sort of texture. This idea is from another blog called The Busy Toddler, and you can get ingredients and instructions. We have a link for that also in the resources. But that's a really fun, hands-on, kind of messy play activity. Water play, we talked about this one in the infant webinar, but water play pretty much works for any age group. So many great sensory benefits to water play. You can add cups and spoons and squirt bottles and spray bottles, whether you have a water table or a baby pool or a big Tupperware container. Tactile bins are another awesome hands-on experience for toddlers. The possibilities here are endless. So we have a link to a list of possible sensory bin fillers on the resources page. And kids love digging through the bins with their hands, pouring and sifting with cups. You can even let the feet get in on the action too. That's a fun way to kind of put some novelty into the tactile bins if you already use those. Our next slide is the vestibular system and vestibular activities. So swinging is a great vestibular experience for toddlers, and there are lots of fun ways to play on a swing besides just swinging back and forth. So you can let little ones swing on their tummies like a superhero. That's a great vestibular activity, but also really nice strengthening activity. Spinning the swing around and then letting them unspin like a tornado. You can let them try standing on the swing for a different kind of vestibular movement experience. And I think Lauren and I always joke that we're the moms that get yelled at on the playground because we let our kids kind of break the rules a little bit. So if you're close by and you can supervise one-on-one, I think this stuff is okay. There are also lots of awesome swings out there, even for indoor use. Tire swings, that's an outdoor option, but tire swings are great. Those pod swings that are made out of Lycra kind of give kids a little hug, so that's a nice little proprioceptive experience also while they're swinging. Trapeze swings where they're holding on with their hands, that's a really nice sensory experience, and then also great for building strength in the hands and arms. Scooters are probably the most commonly used little piece of equipment that we use in therapy. It is a favorite for kids, and it's one of our favorites too. So they can ride on these in so many different ways. They can be on their tummies, and I'm talking about those square scooters with 4 wheels on them. They can ride on their tummies, propelling themselves forward with their hands. They can sit on their bottoms and move with their feet. They can ride on their knees. And we have a link in the resources to a bunch of different scooter activities you can try with kids. Rolling. So I'm sorry, I'm skipping ahead. Yeah, we talked about rolling in the infant webinar, but now that kids are a little bit older, there are even more fun ways to play with this movement activity. So rolling down a hill is always a favorite. You can make a conveyor belt with a bunch of kids rolling side by side. So you can place a stuffed animal or a beanbag and see if they can get it to roll all the way to the end of the group. And we have some more rolling activities too that you guys can try with your classes on the resources page. Rocking, you can try just a rocking chair or simply swaying the child back and forth on your lap. That can be very calming. We all kind of know just from little babies that rocking can be a very calming sensory experience for kids. Our next slide is proprioceptive activities. And remember, proprioception is where we're giving some heavier input and impact and pushing and pulling to the muscles and joints. So crash pad play, kids love to crash and jump and fall on something soft. We have directions linked up so that you can make your own crash pad, or you can just play with heavy couch cushions or big heavy-duty pillows. Kids get a double whammy of proprioceptive input first when they're lifting and carrying the cushions to place them where they want, and then when they jump and fall on them, they're getting that all-over body proprioceptive input. Pushing and pulling is great for providing proprioceptive input. You can try wagons, push carts, wheelbarrows, even playing tug of war gives that same kind of input. Stomping is another great way to, another great proprioceptive activity. Kids can stomp in puddles and mud, or you can even make your own puddles by taping construction paper to the floor. And we linked up a really fun activity in the resources called welly boot painting. So it's like your rain boots, but you get to paint all over a big piece of paper. And that's a really fun little art activity, whole body art activity. Using tools is a great play activity for toddlers. You can try toy mallets and hammers, or you can let them, even with our kids at home, we let them use the real tools, smaller real tools, as long as they're being closely supervised. So hammering and all kinds of tool play is really good for proprioceptive input. And we have linked an ice cube smash idea in the resources where kids get to use tools. Squishing and squeezing Play-Doh. This is probably one of the best fine motor strengthening and proprioceptive activities I can think of. We could do a whole webinar just on Play-Doh play. But kids love making all kinds of things with Play-Doh. You can pretend to cook, make animals, make snowmen, pinch it and roll it into a snake and then squeeze it back into a ball. All of those things are providing that kind of heavy push and pull input to the joints of the hands. Our next slide is auditory activities. We linked up a noisy or quiet game in the resources section. It's from a blog called My Little Sunbeam, and it's a fun game where you categorize objects based on whether they are noisy or quiet. Again, this is coming back to providing kids with that language while you're talking about what you're doing during these sensory experiences. Instrument play is another really great way to explore the auditory system. You can make your own simple shakers or drums using empty containers from the kitchen. Or obviously there are a lot of cool instrument sets out there that are commercially available. Toy microphones are a longtime favorite of the speech therapists we work with. They're an awesome way for little ones to experiment with using their voices in different ways. This is especially true for reluctant talkers. So if you have kids who are shy and standoffish, sometimes whispering into a microphone or talking quietly into a microphone, it's just a fun way to experiment with their voice. Those simple echo microphones are available at the dollar and discount stores. Or you can really go crazy and get one of the fancy battery-powered microphones that plays music and makes different sounds. Either way, it's so much fun for kids to use their voices to experiment with the auditory system. Rain sticks are a really fun and simple DIY project that you can do with little ones. These are full of small pieces though, so you want to be sure you're past the age where kids are putting things in their mouths. But we just use paper towel rolls, and we crumple up strips of aluminum foil and stuff them down into the tubes. And then we add dry rice or dry beans and tape off the ends, and when the dry rice and beans falls through the aluminum foil, it makes a sound like a rain stick. They can decorate the outside. This has always been a big hit with our preschoolers and older toddlers. Another great way to stimulate the auditory system and also work on body awareness is with sound imitating games where you're using your body to make the sounds. So snapping, stomping, clapping, humming, and mouth noises, where there's a leader, kind of like Simon said, there's a leader doing certain movements that make noise, and then the rest of the group has to follow. Going on to our next slide is visual activities. So who's missing? This is a really fun visual memory game for younger kids. You simply have the group sit together and everybody closes their eyes, and then the adult chooses one child to go and hide outside of the room or behind a barrier that the other kids can't see. And then when the other kids open their eyes, they have to try to figure out who is missing from the group. That's a fun one. We've played that even with my kids' cousins at home before, and they really like that one. Partner drawing and partner painting is a fun visual motor and visual processing game. So you can have the child work with an adult or with another child, and one person will act as the leader, and they draw or paint on their paper, and their partner has to try and imitate the exact picture they're making at the same exact time. And then you switch so the other person can be the leader. Sorting activities are a great way to work on visual discrimination, so telling the difference between objects. Kids can sort by color or by shape or by size, and even more complicated attributes as they get older and learn different concepts. I Spy is a good old classic. That's a great way to work on scanning the room or scanning the environment and visually identifying objects in the space. Flashlight play. This is a really fun way to explore the visual system. You can try flashlight tag, or just call out an object in the room, turn off all the lights and call out an object in the dark room and see if the kids can shine their flashlights on it. Or you can just simply read books in the dark with flashlights at quiet time. Our next slide is olfactory, or the sense of smell, and oral sensory play. A lot of times we combine these two systems because they're so closely linked. So here are a few ideas. We have a really great list of oral sensory snacks that you can try with little ones that help them explore different tastes and textures. You know, they experiment with sweet and sour and crunchy and chewy and everything in between. We have that link for you later on a later slide. We've done taste testing lessons in our classrooms where kids can taste different foods and then they can vote on their favorites, and we make a little classroom chart to show who liked which food best. Vibration is a really great oral sensory experience for kids. You can try electric toothbrushes after lunch or snack time. Sometimes we do that with our kids in our preschool. They get to brush their teeth after snack time, and a vibrating toothbrush is just a sort of different way to do that. Scented markers are an all-time favorite smell activity, and I've found in therapy that they're a really great way to keep kids' attention when you're working on drawing or coloring. So if you have kids who just do like a quick drive-by color at the art table and then they're gone, working in scented markers, I think they even have scented crayons, it's a fun way to kind of keep their attention for a little bit longer. Scratch and sniff stickers are another fine motor activity, and they have a little sensory bonus. They smell good. So we are going to put a link, we have a link in the resources to a way that you can make your own watermelon scratch and sniff stickers. That's a fun little craft activity. Scented Play-Dohs and scented tactile bins are a really fun multi-sensory experience because kids are exploring with their hands and noses at the same time. There are so many of these, and they're great. You can pick one for all different seasons. They have, cinnamon smelling doughs and tactile bins for the fall, and then, pine tree smelling ones for the winter, and garden ones for the spring. We have a link to a bunch of those too at the end. Our next slide is gross motor activities. So we kind of talked about some of our favorite movement activities already because we were talking about the proprioceptive and vestibular movement games. But we have so many more games that target gross motor development and gross motor skills like coordination and balance and strength, and we just felt like we had to share some more of these. This is what we do every day in our therapy session, so we thought the more inspiration, the better. As I said, we'll be sharing links to a lot of these so you can go and find them later, and you can find lots of different ways to play with each activity or material, but we'll go through them here too. Animal walks are really great for working on strengthening, balance, and coordination. They're perfect for working into a toddler or preschool classroom theme if you're working on animals or the zoo. Streamers are a fun gross motor activity for younger kids. You can have them imitate your movement with the streamers, or they can invent their own. We have a really cool post about this where we have some YouTube videos linked up that can kind of inspire there's some creative prompts, I guess, for our kids to use their streamers in different ways. You can make your own streamers. People have used shower curtain rings with ribbons on them, or of course you can find them all over the place online. Obstacle courses are a great way to work on a lot of different motor skills at one time. You can make them indoors or outdoors. It doesn't have to involve a lot of complicated materials. You can really just use the things that you have on hand, chairs, stools, pillows. We also love the idea of incorporating movement into learning activities whenever possible. So if you're doing a circle time and you're trying to introduce pre-academic concepts, it's always good to get those little bodies moving and get the hands-on activities in there as much as possible. We have a really great set of alphabet and movement cards over at a blog called Pink Oatmeal. We have that linked up, and it would be an awesome way for keeping kids' attention during circle time while you're talking about the alphabet. Songs that encourage movement are so great for drawing kids out of their shell. So using music is a really great way to incorporate movement breaks throughout the day. Body bridges is a really fun game that we invented one day in a therapy session. And I would love to take credit for it, but I did not come up with it because the kids that I was working with thought of it themselves. They started making their bodies into bridges for their toy cars and stuffed animals to go under. So first, one of the kids did a downward dog pose, and all the other kids put their toys under his bridge. And then they were like, well, how else can we make our bodies into bridges? So they did a plank pose, and then the next one did a crab walk position, and all the rest of the group was, driving their cars underneath the bridges. And this kept everyone entertained for 30 minutes, and they thought they were just playing, but this was an amazing core strengthening and upper body strengthening workout. So they're getting work that they don't even realize they're doing in a really fun and playful way. Movement dice. We have a cool set of free printable movement cubes linked in the resources. That would be a really fun circle time movement activity. Chores are a great way to work on strengthening and coordination, and this age group is awesome because they're still willing and excited to help with chores, so you can actually use these for some entertainment during the day. They can help wash the floor, sweep the room with a small broom and dustpan. They can help wipe tables or counters or windows. And as I said, this age group, they want to imitate what we're doing. So that stuff is great for building motor skills and maybe even training them to help as they get older. Maybe. Tape, again, we've talked about tape before, but this is like a therapist's dream for working on whole body movement. So you wouldn't think so, but we can take a roll of tape and entertain a group of kids for an hour with all kinds of different activities. You can simply make a line of tape on the floor and use it as a balance beam. You can make lines to jump over, kind of like a ladder. You can make a maze to walk or drive toy cars through. There's really endless ways to play here. Balance beams are really great for this age group. Kids can simply walk across, or you can kind of up the challenge for older kids and drop bean bags or stuffed toys on the floor on either side of the beam, so the kids have to bend or even step off the balance beam, stoop down, pick it up, and get back on. That's a great balance challenge for that age. And speaking of bean bags, bean bags are super simple, but they're a really effective way to target lots of gross motor skills. So you can try wheelbarrow walking with kids where their hands are on the floor and you're holding their feet, and you can see if they can balance a beanbag on their back, trying to get it across the room. That's a fun relay race. You can have them crab walk while balancing the beanbag on their stomachs, or you can just have them walk across and balance the beanbag on their head. Relay races are a fun way to work on motor skills, but also social skills, so teamwork and turn taking. You can make it even more fun by having kids move across the room while carrying a ball or another object in different ways. So we were doing this the other night at home. Try carrying a ball from one side of the room to the other using only your heads or using only your elbows. And this one is so fun. When we did this in our preschool classrooms, the teachers even wanted to get in on the action. So they had a whole group of 10 kids and 2 adults moving a ball using only their one finger all together. So that's a fun little motor activity and teamwork activity. Practicing crawling or walking over pillows is a really good balance and strengthening challenge. Building blocks can also be used for gross motor play. So we typically think of them as a fine motor material, but you can use them for movement play as well. Set them up and use them as bowling pins, or you can set them, end to end across the floor and make your own balance beam. Walking and squatting or bending to pick up objects helps little ones learn how to regain their balance when they're on the move. So even if they're just helping to clean up the room with a little basket and they have to bend and pick something up and put it in their basket, that's a great gross motor activity. Placing favorite toys or objects at the top of the steps and having the child crawl or climb or walk up with supervision, of course, to retrieve the objects and then bring them back down. That's a really nice way to practice stairs and gives a little bit more interest to the activity. Our kids at home and at work love pretending to be circus animals, climbing in and out of hula hoops. So we can hold the hula hoop up, up and down, so they have to figure out how to crawl through, and you can leave it down low to the ground or lift it up a little bit, so they have to figure out how to maneuver through it. You can put hula hoops down on the floor and have kids crawl in and out of them or jump in and out of them. Okay, and we can go on to the next slide. This is last but not least. We're going to talk about getting the hands and fingers in on the movement action too. So there are so many ways to engage younger kids in fine motor play, and they're all very beneficial for skill development that will later impact handwriting and cutting and those higher level fine motor skills in preschool and school age. First, opening and closing containers is a great way to encourage kids to use two hands together. And it's really good for fine motor strengthening too. Stringing beads or other objects is another great bilateral or two-handed activity. We've done everything from stringing toilet paper rolls or even cutting up a pool noodle and stringing them onto a jump rope. It's kind of just a different twist on it. So again, it adds to the interest and attention for that activity. And it's also just sort of a different way of manipulating objects when they're bigger. You have to figure out how to use your hands to do that. Stickers, we talked about using scented stickers, which is a great sensory activity, but there are lots of ways to use stickers for fine and gross motor development as well. We talked already about using them to learn the body parts. You can also put them on the walls and have kids reach, like up on their tippy toes and stretch up high. Or put them down low and have them bend down low to get them, pull them off the wall. Even put them up really high and have kids try to jump and peel them off. We have a bunch more sticker activities linked up on the resources page too. We have a game on the blog called Milking the Cow. This is a really fun fine motor strengthening activity. You can use a regular rubber glove like the kind that you would use for washing dishes, and you just use a needle to poke a tiny hole in the bottom of one of the fingers. And then you fill the glove with water and tie a knot at the top, and kids can pretend to milk a cow. So they squeeze the finger of the glove and the water comes out into a bowl or a container. We invented this one as part of a farm theme. We were working on a farm theme at school, and the kids loved it. And we thought it was such a simple activity, but it's become one of our most popular activities on Pinterest. So it's like one of our highest pinned activities. Kids love that one. You can try making your own mini car wash, so kids can put shaving cream or soap all over their toy cars and then use spray bottles or sponges to wash and rinse them clean. Again, we've talked about building blocks for gross motor activities, but for fine motor and visual motor, blocks are really great too. You can see if kids can stack a couple blocks on their own or try stacking up a tower and let them knock it down. As they get a little bit older, you can also see if they can imitate things that you build with your blocks. So, maybe you put 3 blocks in a row and 1 on top, and then say, you make the same thing as me, and see if they can build the same thing that you've made. Simple put-in activities are perfect for keeping little ones entertained while also building those grasping skills and manipulation skills and visual motor skills. You can just cut a hole in the top of an empty cream cheese or oatmeal container, and kids can put popsicle sticks or blocks into the container through the hole. We've really found actually that these put-in activities can be very helpful for kids who have difficulty staying at circle time or group instruction time. So sometimes just giving them something to do with their hands can be really helpful to get them to stay there in their space a little bit longer. We use that a lot actually in our preschool for kids who are having difficulty with attention and behavior. So that's something to try. Books with flaps are a really good fine motor skill builder. Toddlers love opening and closing, and they have to figure out how to get into that tiny little tab and open and close, and they also have to regulate the force of the movement that they're using, so that's a really good activity. Cooking with toddlers can be really fun, and also really messy, but your best bet is to keep it really simple. So encourage kids to get in on the action. They can do scooping and stirring and kneading the ingredients together with their hands. And if you're really not in the mood to make a huge mess, you can just set out a bowl of water and some cooking utensils. That's a little easier to clean up. But pretend cooking, you get all the same motor development benefits as using the real ingredients. So our next one is playing with clothing fasteners, and this is a really good way to build fine motor skills. We have a link to a button snake idea. It's a little bit like stringing beads, except you're using a button, and it's an awesome, I use this in therapy all the time, it's an awesome introduction to practicing with buttons. Kids have to use their two hands together, and they have to figure out how to get the button through the hole of the shape. And it's a little bit easier because the buttons aren't sewn on to a shirt or a practice board, so they can kind of get a feel for the buttons without that huge frustrating challenge. Practice with scissors can start as early as 2 years old, and I know that sounds kind of crazy. I get a lot of raised eyebrows from parents about this, but it's a really good thing to give kids some experience with cutting as early as possible. You can use scissors to cut straws. This is really fun because straws bounce when you cut them, we discovered, and kids love that. They bounce all over and make a big mess. If you can't sense a theme here, I'm really into making a mess with kids, so teachers really love when I come in the classrooms. You can cut Play-Doh, you can cut junk mail, you can cut leaves. That's a really fun fall activity. We have kids cut leaves into little pieces or tear them with their fingers into small pieces, and then we glue them all back together to make a little mosaic. Squirters and squeeze bottles and spray bottles are really good props for fine motor strengthening. You can squirt them at a Target or, again, using them in that little car wash activity. Kids can also squeeze out sponges and rags for really good fine motor strengthening work. Clothespins and clips are awesome and super cheap tools for building fine motor strength. I have painted clothespins. They're all painted in different colors, and then I have colored cards, little index cards that match the clothespins. So kids have to match them up and clip the right clothespin to the card. You can do that with anything. You could tape pictures onto your clothespins and a matching picture on the card and have them match those together, or shapes, or any concept. Tongs and tweezers are also really great for getting little hands ready for cutting with scissors, because you're kind of using that same motion, you know, stabilizing with one hand and then clipping with the other hand. And you can use tongs and tweezers with almost any manipulative or craft material or small object that you have on hand. And last, this is a last-minute addition just the other day, because I was just doing this with my little toddler at home, but finger puppets are a really fun fine motor activity for all ages. Really young toddlers can start just simply by pulling the puppets off of your fingers as you complete a rhyme or a story. We were doing 5 Little Pumpkins, so I had pumpkin finger puppets, and as I was reading the story, he pulled each pumpkin off. I mean, he was not following the story very well, he was just pulling them off, but still a good fine motor experience. And then as kids get older, they can start putting the finger puppets on themselves to practice fine motor coordination and finger isolation, so holding up one finger at a time. I made a real simple set of these finger puppets just with stiff felt from the craft store. So I cut out the circles, and then I used fabric glue to cut a second circle and glue it to the back of each one. And I left a little hole at the bottom, and your finger fits through. So you can make all different shapes and animals or anything that you want. Okay, so I think we have covered tons of ideas here, probably too many to process all at one time. If we go on, I think, to the next slide, you'll see the beginning of all of the resources where you can come back and find these ideas later as you need them. Hopefully this inspires everyone to get moving with the kids you work with and also with your kids at home. Whether it's through hands-on activities that get a little messy, or fine motor activities that get those fingers working and moving, or whole body movement play, all of the ideas we talked about are really good ways to give kids the foundation skills they need later in life as they navigate school and sports and more. So thank you so much for having me.
Thanks, Claire. And what I'll do is I'll go back in and I will copy all those addresses down and put them in a PDF, and that will be located on our website. But now we're going to go to Rich, who has some questions from the audience. So hold on one second and we'll get Rich on the line.
Claire, can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
I sure can. All right, great. Thank you so much for providing all this incredible information to the Be Active Kids Network.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It was great. This is so fun. This is our, what we love to do, so it's fun to share it with other people.
So I've got a few questions that hopefully you can just provide a, brief response to that have come up. The first one is, how can we best use the outdoor environment and nature to assist in the development of motor skills and physical activity?
That's a great question. So being outdoors is, on its own is just such a great motor and sensory experience for kids, but there are lots of ways to kind of use this to support development. Playgrounds are really great for building all kinds of skills: strength, balance, coordination. We talked about the vestibular play on the swing and climbing and hanging upside down. You really can't go wrong with exploring on a playground. Hiking trails, or like being out in the woods and taking long walks, it's great for building endurance. And also you can incorporate lots of sensory experiences here as well. So you can try movement challenges like balancing on a log, or listening scavenger hunts and touch scavenger hunts while you're out exploring in nature. Gardens, at the school where I work, they have a little garden, and that's awesome for motor skill building and also tactile play. So digging with hands or with shovels. They can water plants or spray plants with a spray bottle in the garden. And then probably the best option, as we kind of talked about in the webinar, just free play and open outdoor spaces. So whether it's just a wide open field of grass, or the wooded area where kids can explore and you can kind of follow their lead, this kind of exploration is just the best that you can offer for building all kinds of skills.
Great. And now, a little bit in line with that, so as we talk about toddlers outdoors and connecting with nature, there's also a lot of discussion lately about the use of certain type of equipment or loose parts and how it relates to risk, safety, and development. With things such as jumping from heights, playing with maybe non-traditional or prudential risky equipment, like pool noodles or balloons. Mm-hmm. And really that just something that we think might be developmental but might also be seen as a risk or a safety issue. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about that and toddlers?
Sure. I really think for this, as long as there is responsible supervision going on, the benefit of using these kinds of tools really outweighs the potential risk. So loose parts, like you're talking about, are really great for bringing novelty to motor play. And that, when you bring in other materials, hula hoops or balloons, like you said, or climbing equipment, it means that kids will stay with the gross motor play longer. And when they stay longer, the research shows that they develop more complex dynamic play and then more advanced motor development as well. And so the benefits aren't just in the motor skills when you bring in other types of equipment. It just supports all kinds of skill building, like imaginative play, social skill building, problem solving, and more. And kids, when the environment is not varied and complex, they don't get the same kind of benefits. So as far as the other risk-taking, like jumping from heights and things, my personal opinion is that kids don't get to do enough of these things. And with that basic supervision, kids should really be able to explore and experiment with movement as much as they're able. I think probably in the school where I work, teachers are like, oh my gosh, she has them climbing on the chairs again, or she has them jumping off the bench again. But I just have seen, again, that the benefits of these kind of sensory and movement activities, just as long as you're hands-on and you can be there with them to support safety, the benefits are so big that you can't deny it. So that's kind of my take on the whole thing.
Great. What about, and you mentioned in the first response, but what are your thoughts in terms of mixing up toddlers' time spent in both structured and unstructured physical activity?
Yeah, that's a great question. Lauren and I, my partner on the blog, and I talk about this a lot because as therapists, we're really drawn to more structured activities, kind of like what we've discussed in the webinar today. It's our job to evaluate and identify skill deficits and then target those skill deficits during our session. So we do come to work with a planned activity most times. But then there's so much benefit, as I've mentioned here, to free play and exploration too. We really want to try to kind of walk that line and make sure that we're offering a little bit of both. And I think a really useful approach that I've found, we talked about this when I was mentioning that body bridges activity, but I think introducing a structured activity or introducing a material or piece of equipment, showing the kids, here's some ways to play, giving them some ideas that will target the skills that you're kind of looking for, and then just taking a really big step back and seeing what the kids will come up with on their own is kind of a great way to have the structure or have kind of an idea, a little agenda of what you want to happen, but then most often kids will expand on that. And I just am always so amazed in the work that I do and in watching my own kids that kids really kind of know what they need, and they almost end up developing their own ways to play that target the exact same skills that that they need to develop. So I think with toddlers, I think leaning a little more heavily toward unstructured play and exploration is the best bet, but certainly there's lots of room for introducing in a classroom setting, introducing more structured activities and materials as well.
Two more questions. One has to do with kind of the size of the group that you're working with, so the number of toddlers. So if we're a parent and we have one or two children and we're outside playing and we're working with a lot of different loose parts or materials, that may be kind of easy. But what's your advice for those that have larger groups of toddlers? They may have a class of 10 or 12, and they're trying to find productive, engaging play opportunities for these toddlers.
It's a huge challenge, and it is a great question. I think for younger kids, sometimes structured activities can be a little bit hard because there's wait time, right? So you have to explain the rules of the game or show them and model the game. They have to wait their turn, and that can be hard. But then also, if you don't have some kind of structure, it can be sort of a free-for-all, and it can feel out of control. And I think there are a couple of ways to keep things under control while also having fun with movement. So I think if you have a really big group, it helps to have some kind of designated space. So whether it's a playground, a grassy area that has some kind of boundary like a gate or something surrounding it, or even just a gym space, as long as everyone is in that boundary, you can kind of let go a little bit and let them explore and not hold on so hard to the idea that everyone has to be right here in this group involved in this play. You may kind of have to make your way through smaller groups of 3 or 4 kids while the other kids are, running around or exploring the space on their own, and that's okay. And then also, this is where those props, I think, come into play. So if you think ahead and you have those hula hoops or bubbles or a balance beam or bean bags with you, those tools kind of naturally draw kids' attention, and they're a little more likely to stick with the activity, stay close to you, stay in the designated space, and get all of those good motor and social benefits from, partaking in that kind of activity. So I think it is tricky. I mean, there's no doubt that is a challenge. When this age group, to have a big group, it can feel like herding cats, I'm sure. But I think just adding little bits of structure here and there to the environment and then to the tools that you're using can kind of help tame some of that a little bit.
That's great. Yeah, and I guess as you're also building those other skills of the visuals and the auditory, the commands and the routines and those kind of management techniques do help out with a lot of kids.
Exactly right. I think that's huge. Kids that we've seen that come from, you know, toddler programs or child care programs and then come into preschool, they do have some of those basics under control, right? They know they have to wait their turn. They know they have to walk in line. They know they might have to hold a hand, you know, going from one place to another. And it just kind of makes that transition nice and easy. So the exposure to those things is really great too.
Great. And the last question, which I like to kind of finish everything off, is, so what's your number one piece of advice that you'd give to toddler or preschool teachers or child care providers about how they can really get the most bang for their buck on developing gross motor skills and physical activity in toddlers?
Mm-hmm. I think one thing is just to be really aware that there's a wide range of normal for developmental skills at this age. So it's always really great to be aware if a child seems delayed or, you know, if there's some kind of glaring problem with their development. But it's also really important not to compare kids with one another. So they all have their own different learning styles. They all, you know, some kids are a little more cautious and want to sit back and watch. Other kids are ready to jump right in and kind of steal the show. So it's important to let kids develop at their own pace and not rush them. Excuse me, not rush them. If they're, you know, getting all of these really great structured and unstructured motor experiences, they're getting a lot of active movement play, chances are they're going to come along with their skills in their own time. And I know you said one piece of advice, but here's another. This is just a thought I had after doing this webinar. I think so many of the activities that we've discussed, child care providers are already doing a lot of these things, and everybody has access to the internet and access to Pinterest and things like that. I think what is so huge is to be able to kind of know the why behind what you're doing and to be able to explain that. And I think a lot of times in our kinds of professions, people say, oh, that's great, you guys, you know, you play with kids all day. And there's so much more to it. There's a lot of reason behind what we do, and to be able to articulate that and kind of know, you know, we're not just playing here. This is development happening. This is learning happening. I think it really kind of gives even more credibility to what we do and lets people know what we do and how we support kids. And I think that's why a webinar like this is so cool, to be able to talk about the skills and then kind of correlate those with the activities. So that's another little piece of advice, to be able to really articulate what you do and you know, be strong in the language that you use to talk about what you do with kids, because it's a very important job. So.
Thank you so much, Claire. And again, yeah, we did a webinar a few months back, a webinar series on actual physical literacy. So when you talk a little bit about being strong with how you talk about the development that takes place and the skills that take place, I think it's very important. So if folks on the webinar today missed it, just go to beactivekids.org under resources and look for the series on physical literacy.
Great. Yeah, that's good.
Well, thank you so much, Claire, and we look forward to having you back for some other informative information in the future.
Great. We would love to. Thanks so much for having us.
All right, I'm going to pass it back over to Evie.
Thanks again, Claire. We appreciate you sharing your knowledge and experience with us, and thank you, everybody, for attending today. We hope that you enjoyed it, and we'll take this information back, share with your colleagues, share with your kids, share with, you know, whoever you can to get our kids moving and meeting their developmental milestones. We'll also send a follow-up email out to everybody that will include links to our website and links to the Inspired Treehouse, as well as that PDF copy of all the resources that Claire mentioned. But again, we appreciate everyone being here, and we hope you have a great afternoon.